the Foreign Affairs Manual, and in the Foreign Affairs Manual, that document, that's a formal document that's put out by the U.S. Department of State. It gives guidance to the officers who work for the Department of State, as well as to lawyers and to the public, about what secondary evidence and documentation is required to properly be bona fide or to properly document these life events.
For example, I tell you, again, I'm telling them a secret about my life. I was born in Karachi, which is now Pakistan. And in the FAM, I saw there was a notation that all the records of the Karachi municipality were burned in fire in 1948. So that's very clear. I just make whenever a person comes from that area, Karachi, for example, doesn't have a birth certificate, I have no problem. I'll make a photocopy of the FAM and says, as per the FAM, all the records were destroyed in 1948. Right. Marriages. The Hindu Marriage Act was passed in 1955. Prior to 55, there was no requirement at all. But even today, there's no legal requirement that a marriage to be valid, it has to be registered. Right. Because you won't guess how many marriages in India that are performed religiously are registered. You won't believe it. Less than 5%. Less than 5%. All the people in villages, in those poor areas, they don't know what are you talking about certificate. They went to a temple, they had a proper religious ceremony, and that's it. That's valid under the law.
Right.
Having a certificate or not, having a registration or not, doesn't mean anything. But for the legal purposes, people want to apply for a petition and all that, the immigration service wants it. So it's always a very, don't listen to the first part I said, it's not required. If you plan to apply for immigration, any benefits, anything today, it's a good idea to register the marriage and have a certificate of marriage after you have performed the ceremony.
Right. Right, and I think that that's true also of other of our viewers. We have viewers from Trinidad, Tobago. We have viewers from Indonesia, from also viewers from China and Far East. Again, the Foreign Affairs Manual is a great guide, and it explains exactly what you need to provide in the event that the actual source document is not available. So. Okay,
David, before the program, we were talking about a recent Supreme Court decision on the immigration law, supposedly, that were passed by Arizona.
It was a couple of weeks ago,
Let's
Michael.
Talk about
but why don't we just quickly talk about the Arizona decision? And that was first of all, that was a Supreme Court decision, was argued in April. And what happened was that there were really 4 provisions of that Arizona law that were at play. And three of those provisions, it was determined, were preempted. Preempted means essentially that the federal laws dealing with immigration preempt the state from making a decision. However, there was one provision that did survive. And Michael, you and I were talking about that provision. Maybe you can tell our viewers a little bit about what your view of that
the issue there was whether the police there can stop people and ask for the documents or a proof that the person is legal or not.
Based upon the way they look.
Suspicion.
The way they look, right?
Yeah. Well, the law doesn't say the way they look. But we are saying that.
Yeah, of course.
And the critics are saying that. The law says based upon a reasonable suspicion. Now, what is reasonable? I mean, basically, I tell you what. The Supreme Court left a room there that is possible going forward that there will be litigation, the more cases brought over attention on discrimination, we may have to look at them. And believe me, that will happen in the future. Right. Because I'll tell you, if they take a statistics, for example, how many people were stopped? How many? How many whites were stopped? How many blacks were stopped? Yeah. How many Asians?
If they
how
can
many
ever
Mexicans?
Get those statistics.
So
right?
let's say that only 5% whites were stopped, 95% were other. What is that? Isn't that this? They did that.
It seems like a form of discrimination.
It seems like a color of skin, of course.
Exactly.
You know, between you and me, you are more likely not to get stopped than me.
I don't know. From my look, I get stopped all the time. So, not stopped by the right people.
So that was only one point where the Supreme Court said in favor of Arizona partly, that the rest of the 3 things that they said the Arizona has no authority to arrest and deport the person.
Correct.
Right? And whether some other detaining or detentions or putting in jail.
But basically the 3 of the 4 provisions were preempted. The 4th provision, the one that you described, still remains. But I think that the big message that I think we need to talk about, the big political message here, is that the Supreme Court is sending a general message to the country, and that is that that the federal law should govern immigration. So what does that also mean? It's also a message that we don't want a patchwork of immigration, state immigration laws. What we want is we want one overriding comprehensive immigration law. And I think that the subtle message here by the Supreme Court is, hey, Congress, get with the program.
Exactly.
And come up with what's called comprehensive immigration reform. Michael and I have been describing that for some time now. Come up with an answer to our nation's problems on the immigration front. And that also is interesting because it keys into the dreamer stuff, and that is that there was a lot of discussion about comprehensive immigration reform having as its cornerstone Dreamer Act provisions. So if you take the two and couple them together, it's, I think, our hope that we're getting a glimpse into the future that if President Obama gets a second term, I think that he will deal with the immigration issue in our country. What do you think, Michael?
I absolutely, I think that is going to happen in the future. Let me talk a little bit about what that one provision which they decided in favor of Arizona that they can...
Not to preempt.
Not to preempt.
Yeah.
There, I tell you, Obama administration very smartly what they did. There was a law passed under which they permitted the states to enter into agreement with the federal government under which they will be able to apprehend police people and
it's
then turn
called 287, and it was the
G, I think.
287G. It was the Secured Communities Program.
So what they did,
That's right.
287G, as soon as the Supreme Court decision came in, they terminated that agreement with Arizona, that we no longer will work on that. Right. So what does that mean? If they even stop and arrest a person and notify the immigration service is going to say, we're not interested. They cannot forcibly, they cannot deport them.
That's right.
So what will happen? We got to see what that happens.
Well, the state is going to be basically stuck to deal with it themselves.
Yes.
Without the national...
no, but they don't have the authority to deport.
That's
or
right.
detain. So,
that's exactly right.
So basically, a lot of politics is going on. A lot of politics.
That's the understatement of the century.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the number of bills in the Congress. I mean, this has never seen like that in 40 years I've been in this country. Never. They always are willing to, they always were able to sit down together, compromise, give and take something and pass the law. Compromise whether immigration law, whether taxes, whether all other issues. First time I'm seeing a real disaster here. They just, you know, one says it is day, other say no, it is night.
Right.
And that kind of thing,
That's
you know.
Right. Yeah.
So unfortunately, but we hope that after the elections, something will happen. They'll reach some kind of compromises under which they can resolve these issues and the country can go forward with all these issues.
It would be good. I think, Michael, you made a great point by saying it is so political. And what's very, very interesting, of course, about the Dreamer provisions is how they usurped what Rubio was going to do down in Florida and sort of pulled the rug out from under Mitt Romney, the Obama administration. And I think that there's, of course, we hear a lot about how this was a big political play for the Hispanic vote, but we have seen dreamers from every single cultural background. So,
and to conclude that, I say I really appreciate the Chief Justice Roberts, who was a strong conservative, always sided with the conservative group. This time, he joined the Democrats and more liberal group, making the decision, which was a big surprise for the Republicans as well, all of us, really. But thanks to him, really thanks to him for doing that.
Yeah. Well,
thank
politics makes strange bedfellows, right?
Bedfellows, exactly. And thank you very much, David, and thank all of you for watching the program.
Thank you, Michael.
Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please contact us. We'll be more than happy to provide you any information that you need. And goodbye.
Thanks so much, viewers.